This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 111. What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode number 112 of the L3 Leadership Podcast. My name's Doug Smith, and I'm the founder of L3 Leadership. We're a leadership development organization in Pittsburgh devoted to helping you become the best leader that you can be. And we believe all leaders need to be in a continuous cycle of learning, launching the dreams in their heart, and actually becoming leaders in their community. If you're new to the podcast, this podcast is devoted to helping you grow your leadership skills, and every month we're committed to bring you 3 episodes. One will always be from our leadership events. One will be an interview I do with a high-level leader, and then once a month you'll also get a personal leadership lesson by me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a rating and review on iTunes for us. It does make a difference, and thank you to everyone who has already done that. It really encourages me to keep the podcast going and just to know the difference that it makes in your life. This episode specifically comes to you from our breakfast series. It's going to be our question and answer session with Kimberly Gonxhe, who's the director of the Metro Urban Institute of the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. We'll jump right into the Q&A session, but before I do, I just want to thank our sponsors, BAB Inc., a company led by my friend Russell Livingston on the north side of Pittsburgh. They're an insurance broker, a third-party administrator and consulting firm, a phenomenal company. They host our leadership breakfast and really believe in developing next-generation leaders. So you can check out all the great work that they do on their website at babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com. So as I said, this session comes to you from our Q&A breakfast with Kimberly Gonxhe, the director of the Metro Urban Institute. I know that you'll enjoy it. If you want to listen to Kimberly's talk, you can check it out in episode number 111. She really talked about evaluating the privileges that we have and actually using them to make a better impact in this world. And it's a phenomenal talk. I encourage you to take time to listen to it. As always, you can find ways to connect with Kimberly and learn more about what she's doing in the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 112. That being said, let's jump right into the Q&A, and I'll be back at the end with a few announcements. Kimberly, can you talk about building partnerships and collaborations with others in order to make a long-term impact, and how do you actually make those relationships sustainable?
I think when we go in realizing that we don't have all the answers, and that and really seeing how it can be mutually beneficial. Those types of collaborations and meeting, what work do you do?
I'm a youth pastor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that it's important that when we see that we're able to engage in mutually beneficial relationships. And sometimes we can have on our hearts to do certain initiatives, and it really does seem like we're going to go in and do 4. I always challenge people to see how they can actually end up doing with. And also not just doing with, but then going a step further to saying how can I truly benefit from this relationship, this person, or this collaboration as well. Just because there's something to be said about human dignity and human value. And I think we take away dignity and value when we go in and do for, as opposed to doing with. And so that's one thing regarding collaboration. Another is really, somebody once came up to me and told me that there's going to be a lot of people calling for you, but it doesn't always mean you need to go. And so it's recognizing your opportunities for your assignments. And just because things present themselves as great collaborative opportunities, it may not be your particular assignment. And so it's always doing that litmus test. Does this really line up with who I am in this season, and what's intended for my life?
Kimberly, when God put a vision inside your heart, did you deal with doubt at all along the journey from when you got the vision in your heart to when that actually came to pass, and how did you deal with it if you did?
So my response to that is not for 1 second. Not for 1 second. Did I doubt that vision coming to pass? It took 19 years to come to pass. But those things, we look at, I'm looking at my phone, I was saying we look at our scripture nowadays, our Bibles are in our phones. I'm old enough to remember we actually carried Bibles to church, Doug. But, we look at scripture as being be, this is the thing that, this is the plumb line for my life. I think it's important for us to also, those things that God has put in your spirit, they're just as valid as for God to love the world, or just any other passage of Scripture. I believe that those things that God has spoken into our lives, that they're just as valid. And I take them for face value. And so for me personally, the visions that I've seen, it's something that's fixed. Yeah. And it's just interesting, though, because, when I say I challenged my doctor, they had scheduled my hysterectomy. I had ovarian cancer before I had kids. I was 77. They had scheduled the hysterectomy. And based on that vision alone, and there were other factors as well, so it wasn't the vision alone, actually, but there were other factors as well. But that vision, I literally stood to my feet in the clinic and says, absolutely not. And the guy said, the oncologist is looking at me like, lady, do you realize that you may not be here to have children? That you may die. You need to do this. And I said, well, let God know about that. And I had to do my own research. It doesn't mean that it's an easy route. Actually, it's usually the harder route. Because then you got to say, how do I stay true to what I know God has told me to do? And move forward. And it's some hard places. But I truly believe when we live a life of faith, that's what we got to do.
Can you talk about the career change you made to do what you're passionate about? How did you actually make that transition to pursue your purpose?
Thank you for asking that question. I think no matter what we do, we're going to be who we are. So even when I was a supervisor in manufacturing in plastic injection molding, I was a pastor. I'd go around and all the machine operators, I'd see how they were doing. I was asking about their children, their grandchildren. We just had an amazing relationship. And so you kind of are who you are no matter where you are. But we try to live as authentically as we can. And I think that for my transition, it was just, even if I didn't have all the answers, as long as I was moving a little closer, and even now, moving a little closer to what I know to be true and authentic about myself, I think that then sometimes we need to fit into those shoes for a little bit. It might be several transitions. And really, it might just be a progression throughout life of being just closer and closer to those things that are most authentic for us, our human expression. But for my transition, when I quit my job at Delphi Mobile Systems, and began to work in the nonprofit sector, which was a huge transition. I'm like, okay, so who's making the copies around here? And they're like, you? I'm like, what? Because I worked for a Fortune 100 company. Everybody had a role. I never did any of that stuff. But I took that leap of faith because I knew that that's where God was calling me, that I was going to one day run my own organization, and I needed to learn the skill set to do that. It wasn't the perfect setup, it wasn't the perfect setting, but it was what was most available at the time. And then I went from there to the next opportunity that was suitable. And I think that's what life is, just as long as we can say that I feel like I'm being true to myself in this, then I think we're doing something. As long as we don't feel like we're totally selling out, because when we sell out, we burn out, and nobody wants a burn out situation.
You said that you spent the first 34 years of your life living in fear and being driven by fear. What caused you to start living by faith instead of living by fear after 34 years?
And it wasn't the same amount of fear. But what changed for me was embracing God's actually breathing. A good therapist. That's probably the number one thing. Is a good therapist.
Everyone write that down.
But it was a eureka moment in my life and this wasn't instantaneously. It was a series of months and years of just realizing that I was loved by God. And that no matter what happened to me in my childhood, per se, that I deserved to be loved. And those are two things. And then on top of that I was enough. And on top of that it's okay to breathe. When you have a childhood that's based on a trauma, sometimes you can just always be driven by just this anxiousness or this drivenness to just do better, to be better. But I had someone that spoke into my life and said, you know what, that chapter of your life is over. You've made it out. You don't, those tools that you were using, this is them talking to me, that I was using, they worked as far as survival. But once you've gotten through survival, those same tools that worked magnificently then actually work to your detriment outside of that situation. And you need a new set of tools in the toolbox. And this person said to me, that chapter of your life is over. Turn the page. Let's start writing something new. And that one thing, it really allowed, it opened up a world of peace and freedom. So I really hadn't breathed in life. It was like I had gone through all those years just holding my breath, trying to hold everything together, thinking the sky was going to fall and something I would see. And when we allow ourselves the freedom in Christ just to be and to not be so afraid and just to let go, that's the huge one for me, is I let go, and I've never felt more peace in my life than I feel today.
Can you talk about getting help, even through therapy? Isn't therapy only for crazy people? Why do leaders need to seek out help?
Sure. And therapy comes in a lot of ways. And so, hey, I see, you don't have any hat on. But therapy comes in a lot of ways. It can be a really great friend sometimes. But it is important that, and sometimes we may not even understand all that we need to talk through and to process through. But when you feel a wrestling inside of yourself, it's good to talk to people who they learn how to help people navigate. And I know when I first started therapy, I really didn't even know exactly what I needed to talk through and work through, but I knew that my life had become somewhat. There were certain things I needed to process through for my kids' sake. That my past had been driving my future way too much. And so I didn't have the exact words to say or understand it all, but it was something that was pressing within me that I've got to do better, and I've got to be better, and this can't be life. The way I was feeling at that point in time, this can't be all there is. And some people, especially within different communities, it can be seen as a stigma. You've gone to a therapist, you went to a shrink, and it's seen with negative connotations. But therapy, oh my gosh, it's God's gift to us. There's people that God educates to help us through. And the thing is I think a lot of us, especially in U.S. culture, we think that we got it all together and we can do this and you're strong. And we attribute positive attributes by pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Who the heck does that? You know? Really. And that goes back to my friend James. It's Pastor James. He said, we're a community. And I don't have it all together. I need help. And when you finish working through one thing in therapy, and you breathe a little bit and live into that place, then it's like an onion, and other things open up. And you say, well, I can use some help processing through this too. And so it's actually one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself is to go get therapy.
What are some of the norms that you've seen in the U.S. culture that we may take for granted that we may need to challenge?
Okay, so I can be a little progressive, and actually a lot progressive. Not fully. So norms. As simple as how we raise our kids. You know, a little girl pops out. What do we put on her? Pink. And we
I'm looking for, what some of you are wearing today. Yeah.
But we look at pink as being pretty and as being, almost like passive. And what do we buy little girls? We buy them these cute little Barbie dolls, or we do this, and that's a beautiful thing. But how much is nature? How much is nurture? And then when you get a little girl who's a Serena Williams, it's just had it all together in the best type of way. We put folks in boxes, and I just mentioned gender. Just as soon as we're born, we're put into a box of what we should be. I mean, I'm an engineer. In my classes, many times I was the only woman. I was the only minority. And when I got into corporate America, not only was I the only, I would be sitting, I'll never forget, just sitting in these boardrooms, 50 people around the table. Only woman, only minority, ethnic minority, and the only person who come from a low economic status. Which is another category, by the way. Because, when you come from a higher economic status, there are so many privileges that you have. From, that guy goes with my daddy. And so, they can give me and so there's so many ends that you have. I didn't have any networks growing up. There were no networks. So I say that just to say that because of the way I was brought up, there weren't these norms of a woman does this. So I was able to see myself as an engineer. I was able to see myself differently than a lot of women see themselves. And so that's one thing I'll bring out is just the way that we nurture people. To not categorize, but to nurture them according to their gifts and their talents and who we see them to be, and not try to force them to be something different. Or not even but to give our kids a plethora of opportunities of things to play with. To allow our girls to play with little trucks. Who knows? She may be designing trucks one day. But to do certain things so that we're offering them everything and then letting them lean into what their niche is. So that was a safe answer for me, and I'm going to leave it at that right now.
How can we really make a difference in the neighborhoods we live in, especially when we find that the majority of the people don't want to change?
So when I experience stuff like that, my first instinct is to pray. Because I can't make anybody do anything. But the greatest battles are won through prayer. And so I even have a place in my office where sometimes I'll just close the door, shut the blinds, and I go on my knees. Because I realize that I can't change anybody's mind about anything. But God knows it all. And if I can affect change in any way, the greatest is through surrendering in prayer. And leaving it there. That's what I tend to do when I experience situations, because you can debate all day long. And, oh my gosh, those Twitter and Facebook, those social media things where people go back and forth. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, why do you do that? And sometimes it might be effective because maybe people begin to think a little differently because they were challenged in this way or whatever. But that's my first thing is prayer, because that's where I get the bang for the buck. And then through that prayer, it's not just Lord change them, but Lord show me how to proceed from here in interacting with these folks, and show me what to do. And so that doesn't alleviate me from needing to change as well. And so that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. But really, that's how I approach that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the thing is that when I back off like that and take my interests and my anger away from the situation and leave myself open and vulnerable, usually then I get direction as to how to proceed from there. And then usually the situation sometimes even changes so that it's not as tough as it needs to be. Or maybe I'm better suited because God has worked with me to deal with that situation. The situation hasn't changed at all, and those people are still saying all the same things, but my approach to it is different.
How can we connect with you and what you're doing, and how can we come alongside and serve you?
For prayer requests, you know what? If you could pray for me as I lean in deeper. I believe everything I've shared today. And when you live a life by faith, it's actually the hardest route. It's the hardest route. And that comes with a lot of challenges. It comes with a lot of, you really have to have a lot of stamina behind you to stick it out. And so pray my strength in the Lord. As far as connecting, the Metro Urban Institute is doing some amazing things. As far as partnerships and collaboration throughout the city, if you're interested in seeing some of the work that we're doing, we don't shy away from issues. We don't shy away from of just natural everyday occurrences around us, and we don't take our privilege for granted either. And so we advocate for folks, and we sit at a table and we sit at a round table where everyone is an equal and try to work out situations for different neighborhoods, different communities in a collective way, in a collaborative way that is beneficial to the whole. And we offer educational programming as well. We have a wonderful graduate student in urban ministry for anyone who's in the urban center in any capacity, living, working, playing, and just want to experience or get more tools in your toolbox on how to work in the urban center. We offer classes for that. And so one great way to connect would be maybe to sign up for our newsletter. And you can sign up for that on our website at Metro. It's PTS. If you go to www.pts.edu/Metro Urban and use Metro Urban as one word, there's a way to sign up for our newsletter to stay informed of what we're doing. We work with all kinds of organizations throughout the city, and I think we're doing meaningful work. So that's a great way to stay plugged in.
Do you have a theme for the year? And if so, specifically, what are you trying to work on this year?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I just met with my life coach last week. And as I mentioned earlier, anything that's healthy grows. And anytime we see ourselves in this satisfied state, that means we're not where we should be. And so one thing that came out of my coaching session last week was just authenticity for me and just what makes me me. And so, and that's changed this last year. I've really changed by leaps and bounds this just 1 year. And so for the year ahead, I'm challenged to then look at my entire life. I've already mapped out just where I am and what makes me authentically me. Now I'm going through all of my life goals. Like I have a life goal list that's like 136 items.
What's the craziest life goal you have?
The craziest? Oh gosh. Well, I'm planning on climbing Kilimanjaro in a year and a half.
Let's go. Who's in?
Who wants to go to Tanzania? But the life goals that I made just 4 years ago, I'm having to go through them with a fine-tooth comb, and some of them just don't fit anymore. And so I'm looking at my entire life and seeing what fits the authenticity plumb line and what doesn't. And it's good just to trim. And so, yeah, the theme in my life for this upcoming year is authenticity.
Hey everybody, and thank you so much for listening to our Q&A with Kimberly. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, if you would like to connect with Kimberly after you listen to that, you can go to the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 112. And again, you can also listen to Kimberly's talk if you haven't had a chance to on episode 111. It's definitely worth listening to. I want to thank our other podcast sponsor, 068, a company led by my friend Daniel Bull. They actually hire ex-convicts and start companies with them. They're just doing a phenomenal work and transforming lives in a very, very special area. And if you want to learn more about what they do and see some of the stories of the lives that have been transformed, you can go to 068.org, all spelled out. As always, we'd really appreciate if you could subscribe to the podcast and rate and leave a review on iTunes. It really does make a difference. And again, we'd love to see you in a live event here in Pittsburgh. And you can get all the info you need on how to stay up to date with us on our website at l3leadership.org. You can simply sign up for our email list, and you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, Making the Most of Mentoring, which is my step-by-step process for getting meetings with mentors. So that being said, I always like to close with a quote. And I love this quote by T.D. Jakes that I heard recently at a conference, and he said this. He said, "It's been my life's pursuit to see how much God's put in me." I absolutely love that. It's been my life's pursuit to see how much God's put in me. And here's what I know about you. God's put so much in you. There's more in you than you think there is. And I want you to encourage you to make your life pursuit finding how much God's put in you, because I know there's so much there. And that's why we exist, to help draw that out of you. So thanks again for listening, being a part of L3 Leadership. My wife Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you next episode. See ya.